Hi, Mark Anderson here, ICT Evangelist, Head of Education at NetSupport Group. And on this edition of NetSupport Radio, I'm really delighted to be talking about a topic that's really something I'm massively passionate about, and something that we're really passionate about here at NetSupport as well, and that is digital strategy. One of our products, NetSupport DNA, is absolutely superb at supporting your digital strategy. And I'm really excited to bring on my colleague, Andy Earp, in a few moments to share with us about how our product can really, really help in so many ways with your digital strategy and making it sort of come to life and really work with you in your school. But before we jump into that, I did want to share with you, if you haven't seen it before, and if you haven't, then where have you been? But we've created a really popular guide to creating a digital strategy in education here at NetSupport. We've got lots of case studies in there from schools from not just the UK, but around the world. It won't tell you what to do for your school because every school is different, and context is absolutely important. But there are some hallmarks of what a good one looks like, as we say in education, with the guide. And so held within there, it talks through the things you should be considering and thinking about, who your stakeholders are, what the things you should be considering within your digital strategy. Feedback has told us that it is really, really useful as a bit of a blueprint to think and what you should be considering when it comes to thinking about your digital strategy within your school and your context and your setting, regardless of where you are within the world. So please do check that out. You can do so, as you can see scrolling across the bottom there, the schooldigitalstrategy.com website. And so please do check that out. But for this episode, we're going to be talking with Andy Earp, as you'll have seen on the intro slide there, who's going to share with us some things around digital strategy. So let's stop me talking, which is always probably a good thing, to be honest, and bring Andy in and find out how he's doing. Hi there, Andy. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, really, really good. And I'm really excited to sort of learn more from you today about NetSupport DNA. I've used it plenty myself, but I'm a mere Padawan compared to your sort of Jedi Master status. You are the Obi-Wan of NetSupport DNA, I would say, Andy. So I'm really excited to hear from you about all the ways in which DNA can, or because there are loads of features, aren't there? But many of the ways in which NetSupport DNA can help support your digital strategy within your school. So with that in mind, what I'll do is I'll jump straight into the questions, if that's all right with you, Andy.
Yeah, sure thing.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, so my first question is about this thing to do with application metering. Now, I see the word meter and I'm thinking parking, but clearly application metering has got nothing to do with parking your car or fines or anything like that. So first of all, really, my first question really is, what is application metering? And then how can it, within DNA, support your digital strategy within your school setting?
Yeah, absolutely. So the application metering, it's really one of the key components of NetSupport DNA, and it allows the console operators to log on to the DNA console. And there's going to be information that's retrieved from your agents in relation to what application they've been using and running. So it's going to report back to the DNA server and store that information centrally, and then your operators will be able to go into the console and review that information. They'll be able to see which applications have been in use and for how long they've been in use. So it's going to tell you information such as the start time, the end time, but more importantly as well, the active time. And that's the time that the application was actually in focus on that machine, because it could have been started on that machine and closed down at the end of day or end of lesson. So it might look like it was in use for a full hour or so. When in fact it might have actually only had 5 minutes of active time on that application. So it's going to allow your operators to view that information and then use that to help them make decisions. And this could be decisions, it could be a new product, a new application that they've just implemented at the school, and maybe it's not getting the usage that they would be expecting. So it could be a case of, do they then need to provide more internal training on that application? You know, is it been targeted to the right staff members or to the right end users, the right students? You know, so you can use that to look at, okay, do we maybe need to push that application out elsewhere. But also you can look at that from a cost saving basis as well. So if you've got renewals and things sat for existing applications that you've had, then again, you can look at the usage of it. So it's all about reporting on the usage of those applications on your devices. So those agents, I say, they're going to be sending that information up to the DNA server to allow you to look at, which applications have been opened, which ones have been in use, and for how long they've been in use for. And you can look at that on a machine basis, or you could look at a particular user and see which applications they've been using as well. So it's not only just about looking at, which machines is it being used on, but I say maybe if you've got a particular application that should be used by certain key members of staff, and you can look at it from a user level as well.
That's really useful, Andy, because when schools only have a finite amount of money and there isn't much money at all to start with, and so it's really important to know, if you are spending money on a particular piece of software, is it actually bringing that return on the investment? I guess it's also really useful, if a school's sort of running a trial on a particular product before they sort of look at deploying it large scale across the organization. You're trying it. Is it actually, making the impact you wanted it to have before you actually then go out and spend the big bucks on deploying it across the whole setting?
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, it really does allow you to make those type of decisions as to, should you be pushing this out further? Are people not happy with it as a solution, and those kind of it gets that conversation started is the main thing, really.
No, brilliant. And whilst we're talking about this sort of thing, I'm guessing you've got this question around application usage. I guess we can see similar things with device usage as well.
You certainly can, yeah. So you can also, with NetSupport DNA, you can look at logon sessions. So it's common for us to be working with customers and look at information as to who's been logging onto machines. So you could find out, okay, when was that machine last logged on, and was it within a period of time, and what was the total log-on times on that machine, to allow you to make decisions as to, okay, which pieces of kit are maybe being used more than others. Again, which they can then start the conversation. Do you need to redeploy kit to other places, or do you need to, are there issues with that machine? People are logging onto it, finding that it's really slow, and logging off and not using it. So there could be things that maybe aren't being raised with the IT team, and looking at that usage information can, again, say, okay, well, why are these machines not in use as much as the others? Do they need, putting in a different location where maybe they're going to be utilized more? Or is it because there are issues with those machines that need some investigation? I'll contact the person that's, in that department or in that area.
That's really, really useful, Andy. Thank you for sharing that. It's all about time saving, isn't it? And knowing where the time is being saved. One thing that comes up regularly in conversations I have with schools is the idea of where can we reduce workload? Where can we sort of save time? All these sort of things. That sort of leads in quite nicely to my next question for you, which is about automation. Because there are a bunch of things you can do, I know, inside DNA. You know how to do it far more than I do. I know the functionality is there. But automation is possible in DNA, and that can be really helpful in lots of different ways, can't it? So the question really clearly on the screen here right now is, how does automation in NetSupport DNA support your digital strategy? What I'm keen to unpick with you, Andy, is what features within DNA are automatable, and what sort of impacts might that have on workload, and how can it actually end up supporting your digital strategy, either through reducing overheads or ensuring correct usage and all those sorts of things?
Yeah, certainly. So with automation, some of the key components of DNA, again, they have methods of allowing you to automate it, so you're not having to have an operator performing those tasks manually each time. Key features that kind of comes up with that come to mind straight away are going to be things like the reporting tool. So we've got a query tool in NetSupport DNA. Lots of people will use that to create their own reports, maybe based on, when was the last log-on sessions for these machines? What was the application usage? What are the top 10 applications being used? And there's lots and lots of different queries that you can create to generate those reports. And a lot of people using DNA will be going in and manually running those, and that's absolutely fine. It's not a wrong way of doing it, but to save time, there is actually a query scheduler component which allows you to predefine these reports or queries, I should say, and then set a scheduled basis for that to run. So maybe on a Friday or on a Monday, you come into work and an email is sent to you with a copy of that report attached with the results of that information. And that's been used in the past for e-safety reports, but also for usage reports. It's always had a lot of customers using that for usage reports there. So being able to automate those is a really powerful feature. Other things that you can do to help you with your digital strategy are things like the power management. So we've got the energy monitor, which will tell you which machines are being left on overnight. So you've got the power usage being recorded by DNA for inside and outside of your working hours that you specify within the product. And that's great for you to report on that. That's brilliant. However, to also then try and help solve that problem, we've got the option to put in power plans so they can be automated. So you can pick the days of the week and the times that you want DNA to schedule a power on of your devices and to schedule a power off of those devices. And again, that's really powerful and is profilable as well. So it's one of those options in DNA that you can profile. So it's not a global setting that would apply to all your DNA agents. You could set that to maybe your student desktops, but maybe have exceptions for other devices, or maybe set different times. Maybe the student desktops all need to be turned off by 5 or 6 o'clock after maybe any after school clubs, but maybe the staff devices, maybe you want those left on a bit longer in case people are still using those outside of the normal hours. But there are also exclusions. So if you have got a shutdown policy in place, it will notify a user on the machine before just shutting down the machine as well. And to go another step further from that, you've also got inactivity. Again, to help save power and make sure things are maybe being placed into standby mode or hibernated. When they're going through a period of inactivity, you can set these inactivity schedules, which again can be automated. A lot of people target those across the lunch break where maybe devices aren't in use as often. So maybe after 15 minutes, if the machine is logged off, put it in standby mode or turn the machine off. So you can set those inactivity plans as well, which again help. And for the technician, to help them, save them tasks, we do have, again, another component that's got some automation in there, and that would be your software distribution. So you can send out software packages to your machines using DNA, and to again maybe save time, you could schedule those to go at a out of hour period. So again, rather than having to rely on somebody always being there to do that, you could create your package prior or before the time, and then schedule that to be sent at an automated time later on. So there are various ways in DNA that you can automate certain things, but they're probably the kind of three main key ones, I would say.
That's really interesting, Andy. And I'm going to throw a curveball question. We didn't plan this one, but I'm going to ask you, DNA isn't just about managing sort of desktop devices, is it? We can use it for managing switches and access points and all these sort of things. So I'm guessing the power management stuff can apply to those sort of things as well?
So with the managing your additional devices there, that's really going to be support for SNMP devices. So there are discovery options in DNA which will allow you to detect SNMP enabled network switches and SNMP enabled network printers. And they could be used for generally they're used more for kind of alerting on bandwidth utilization, so you could send out alerts based on that information, and for the printers you can alert on maybe the toner levels of the printer. But again, that is a form of automation there, so you can have alerts sent to you if the toner levels are dropping on the printers, if the switches are utilizing more bandwidth than you'd be expecting, you can have automated alerts sent out for you for that as well. So there is SNMP enabled support for devices there. I'd say out of the box, that's the SNMP network switches and printers that we're supporting there. But yeah, there's certainly some automation there. There's also, just to kind of go on with that, there's a discovery tool as well. So you can also set DNA, you can configure that with certain IP ranges to scan. So if machines are started up on the network that don't have a DNA agent on, again, they will appear then in the discovery feature for you to then deploy to as well. So there is automation for detection of new devices on the network, which again, from a IT administrator point of view, is really powerful to know that you've got machines turned on that maybe haven't had the agent installed yet and need that agent, or machines that maybe weren't expecting to be turned on there.
That's really interesting, because again, part of making sure the digital strategy actually comes to fruition and works as you want it to, a large part of that is about, knowing what you've got, when it's being used, so forth and so on. And so again, having those features, just time saving, knowing when a tone is running low, that in itself, we talk about marginal gains an awful lot here at NetSupport, don't we? And where we can add up and aggregate all those little wins, those little bits of time saved, that adds up to a big win over time. So that's really interesting and useful to know. So thank you so much for sharing that, Andy. Cheers. I wanted to talk to you now as well, because you mentioned about device discovery and things. We've talked about application usage and device usage and all these sort of things. But I'm mindful that we've got inventory tools within there as well. So how does the hardware and software inventory in NetSupport DNA support a digital strategy within a school setting?
Yeah, so with hardware and software inventory, again, really useful. Hardware inventory sounds quite simple out of the box. It's a way of collecting the inventory information from your devices and sending that up to the DNA server to allow you to review that information. But what that can help you to look at is you can then identify maybe the lower spec machines on the network that maybe need upgrading. Maybe you're looking to upgrade to a newer version of a later operating system, or install an application that requires more resources on the devices. So you can essentially look at that information that's been returned from DNA to then identify those machines. And you can do that with dynamic groups. So the machines will drop into those dynamic groups if it's a certain spec, maybe a certain amount of RAM, or a certain CPU or bits and pieces. You can also look at the disk space usage as well. So within that hardware inventory report, it's going to tell you how much free space is on the machines. Again, if you're looking at tracking that, which machines maybe are running out of local free disk space, and you've got that information there. So that's really handy to know that from a hardware inventory point of view. With those, you can also record lease and maintenance contract information. So again, if you're trying to put all that information and collate that all in one place, then you can do so within the DNA console. So you can create a leasing contract or a maintenance contract. You can specify, where you purchased that from and other information that relates to that contract. And then you can link that to either a device or a group of devices in DNA. So you've got all that information all stored there, rather than it being lost somewhere on a file on the system where you can't remember where the contract was. So it's nice having that information. And not only is DNA going to tell you about your inventory now, so that DNA agent sat on those machines, as it detects changes, it's going to send that information up to the server to be shown in the console, and that's great. So if you're looking in the hardware inventory overview, it's going to show you that most up-to-date information. But you can also look back on the history. So if you want to look back on a device and find out when items have changed, maybe there have been previous hardware upgrades on the machine in the past, then you can go and look through the history component of DNA, and you can look at the history of the hardware of that device. And similar thing with software inventory. So software inventory, again, that DNA agent sat on those machines is going to collect information based on the installed programs and the applications on that machine. And it's going to send that information up to the DNA server, again, store that centrally in our database. And you can then look at reports as to which programs and applications are installed and where. And you can do custom searches. If you've got bespoke applications, you can look for detections for those. And as well as that, you can also categorize those. So you can set your programs into certain categories. Maybe you've got a build category of all the applications that relate to your school build that should be there. So you can put those all in one category. You can hide programs. So you can look at all of that information. You can then also put license counts with those. So if you've got a certain set license limit for a particular program, you can feed that information into the DNA system, and DNA will also report the number of installs of that product on the different devices, and then it will match that up against the number of licenses you've set in DNA. So then you've got a report telling you whether you're over or under utilizing that program. And you can then again make decisions. That then also then ties into your application metering that we discussed about earlier. So maybe if you know that you've gone maybe slightly over a license count for a particular program, you could then delve into the application metering information to find out, well, is it actually in use on all those machines, or can I, just uninstall it? So rather than panic and run off and go and buy more licenses straight away, you could look at the application metering and say, okay, actually it's not fully utilized. Let's uninstall it from these machines. They're not using it. Maybe check with those staff members, and if they're happy, yes, we'll just uninstall it from there, and then we're within our licensing. And again, you can look back on the hardware, not the hardware, on the history changes of the software as well. So if somebody's been installing programs, uninstalling programs, you've got that information stored in DNA as well. So again, you can look at, okay, we have got a strict license count on this. Who keeps installing it that maybe shouldn't be installing it? And we maybe need to have a chat with them.
No, that's really, really interesting, Andy. I mean, one of my key takeaways from this conversation, and when we talked about it before, actually, is when you hear the words of hardware and software inventory, you kind of think, well, it's just going to give me the PC names, and we know how many PCs we've got, or how many installs of Photoshop we've got, or whatever. But it's all the information. It's the speed of the processor. It's how much RAM's on that machine, the capacity, how much of that hard drive has been used. There's so much information. It's really information rich, isn't it? And as somebody who leads on these sort of things, and whether you're from a sort of school leader perspective or an IT manager perspective, it helps you have all that information so you can make informed decisions about what best to do within your real estate, doesn't it? And I think that's just so powerful.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, completely agree. It lets you keep an eye on everything, really. And one bit that I didn't really touch on with the software inventory, you can also do file scans, so you can scan machines for particular files as well, and that's included in the software inventory component. Often gets missed and not always associated with that component. But if you wanted to scan for maybe sensitive file types that could contain sensitive data, Excel spreadsheet files, things like that, you can scan the local machine to see where they're located, which again helps with your compliance in your school. So if you've got very strict policies as to where files should be stored, then again that gives you that option of just keeping an eye on that as well.
No, absolutely. Now, look, we've talked about reporting, we've talked about all these different things, but you talked also about how DNA can sort of let you know when things aren't as they should be, and so forth and so on. So I'm guessing that sort of ties in a bunch of ways into my next question, which is around alerting. So how can alerting in NetSupport DNA support your digital strategy, Andy? And what is alerting as a feature within inside NetSupport DNA?
So alerting, there are a few different sections of alerting. You've got PC alerts and you've got DNA console and system alerts, and they will do slightly different things. Your PC alerts are going to do things such as be able to tell you, if a machine is running low on disk space, if somebody's used a USB device on a machine, so you can detect removable devices. You can do lots of different things. You can also check whether a process is running or not running on the device. And as well as just detecting those triggers, it will then send alerts. And those alerts can send notifications to your operators using a couple of different methods. One would be a pop-up in the console. So if a machine was detected to have triggered one of those alerts, then you would see a little alarm next to the machine, and a pop-up would appear in the console window, which is great, but not everybody's got the DNA console open, all the time. Hopefully everybody has, but they're not always going to have that open, or maybe not always going to be at their machine. So with the alerts, you can also specify email alerts. So if one of those triggers coming from one of those devices, it is going to send over an email to the operators of your choice that were configured on that alert. So they will, on their device, wherever they are, they're going to then pick up that alert, and they'll be able to see, what that trigger was, and then can then make a decision based on that. So again, it's a bit in line with the automation we were talking about earlier. Rather than having to constantly check the disk space and looking at the hardware inventory information and running reports that way, it's a way of allowing you to receive alerts for that. You can also alert on things such as software licenses being exceeded. So there's a license alert for that, or specific hardware changes on a device. There are certain hardware changes that we've got triggers for, and again, that will send an email to your IT admin or your console operator, so they'll be notified of those changes. So if somebody's installing something when they maybe shouldn't be, or attempting to, then that would be picked up if it detects the installed application, and then send that email over to your IT admin. So it's a really nice tool. It can also monitor the event log as well. So if you've got particular event IDs that you want to alert on that are occurring on machines, maybe at random, and you want to find out which machines are getting that error, you can set up PC alerts to detect that and notify the IT admins then as well. As well as there was another one where you could capture screenshots of error messages that might be popping up on machines. So again, you can turn on alert that will do that. So if an error message pops up and the caption text for that contains certain words, then that can send a email alert and a copy of that screenshot to the IT admins as well. So yeah, it's a lot of functionality in that alerting component.
That's really, really powerful. I mean, you've shared an awful lot of things during our conversation today, Andy, about the ways in which DNA can really help sort of drive efficiencies and all those sort of things. So my final question, really, time is money, and so I don't want to keep you here for the entire day talking. But I wanted to ask you, my final sort of question, really, about how DNA can support your digital strategy by reducing overhead. So you've shared a few things there that we've talked about, some of the time-saving features in there. But how else can DNA help support your digital strategy by reducing those overheads that you have within your school setting?
Yeah, so as I say, we've touched on a couple of these so far. So things such as log-on sessions for machines, so the tracking of the log-on sessions to find out maybe which machines aren't being used as much as others, then that can help you save money in the long term by either redeploying those devices to more suited departments, or identifying which ones are maybe being used more than others, essentially. You can also do things such as your printing. So you can look at the print usage. So the DNA agent, again, on your devices, they can detect the print usage. They'll send that information up. So they'll be able to tell you which printers are maybe being used more than others. You can associate costs with those print jobs. So you could maybe see, if you've got certain printers where that cost is higher, you can see that information and which ones are maybe being used more than others. So again, you could then make decisions as to, do you maybe need to change where your printers are installed, so you can use it for those decisions. You can then look at information such as the power management plans. So again, with those energy usage reports, it's going to tell you in DNA your inside working time, your outside working time. And then those power plans are going to help you reduce those costs. So some customers, when they're first looking at DNA, they'll run those energy usage reports for maybe a week or two, just to gather the data as to how it's being used currently. Then they'll implement the power plan so that they can then compare and say, okay, this is what it was costing us before, and now that we've got the power plans in place, this is the cost that it's saved us for ensuring those machines are being turned off overnight. But then, as I say, you've then got the application metering for making those decisions on your software renewals. Which products are being used, which ones aren't being used, and then there's the cost saving that can be involved with that. And then I guess another one would be the remote tools available in DNA. So saving your time of always having to send technicians on site to different places, using their time better by providing them the ability to remote onto devices and provide support that way. can offer cost savings in the long time as well. A lot of trusts are using DNA where the trust team might be a bit more central. They don't want to necessarily have to keep sending out engineers to different places to support sites. So it can be nice for them to be able to use those tools in DNA to not only just see the information that's been reported, but to look at providing support with NetSupport DNA as well.
Well, that helps to drive efficiencies as well, doesn't it? The fact that you haven't got to wait. If I've got a problem like my machine, I'm in school X, but the IT services are in office Y, 5 miles away at the trust office, let's say, it means somebody can jump in, have a look, fix it there in a moment, and I haven't wasted 3-4 hours of my working day waiting for someone to fix my machine and get me working. There's so many ways in which DNA can drive these efficiencies and time savings and reduce overheads overall. I've learned so much, as always, with these conversations, Andy. Thank you very much for taking the time to join me today on NetSupport Radio to share about the ways in which NetSupport DNA can support your digital strategy. There are more ways, believe me. If you're interested in finding out more, if DNA sounds like something that is of interest to you and you're interested in getting a trial, you can see going across the bottom here. Just go to netsupportdna.com/education and start a conversation with our team through the talk chat in the corner there. They'll be very happy to get you set up with a trial, get you up and running, and you can discover for yourself why DNA can really help to support and drive forward your digital strategy within your school and setting. Look, thank you so much again for taking the time to join me today, Andy. If you do want to find out more, I said, please do visit the site. And if you want to stay in touch with us, please do either follow myself at ICT Evangelist. I'm always happy to take questions if you want to reach out to me, or alternatively, as you can see on Andy's Twitter handle there, at NetSupport Group. And that's our handle on all social media, from Twitter to LinkedIn to so forth and so on, wherever you're choosing to look for your social media activities. So look, thank you very much indeed again for joining me and Andy today on this episode of NetSupport Radio, exploring how NetSupport DNA can support your digital strategy. Thanks for taking the time to join us, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode of NetSupport Radio. Thanks.